Hi class, Chapter 11, To Have and to Hold. As usual, after the strawberry season was over in Santa Maria, Papa decided to move to San Joaquin Valley in Central California to pick grapes. Like the year before, we had spent the summer months picking strawberries for Ito, the Japanese sharecropper. This time, however, we were not going to Fresno to harvest Mr. Sullivan's vineyards. Papa did not want us to live in Mr. Sullivan's old garage again, so we headed for Orosi, a small town a few miles southeast of Fresno. Papa had heard that a grape grower there named Mr. Patrini had nice places for farm workers to live. We packed our belongings and left Santa Maria in September, the week school started. Papa drove, Mama and Roberto sat in the front seat. My younger brothers, Trampita, Torito, and Ruben, and I sat in the back. Rora, my little sister, slept on Mama's lap. Everyone was quiet. The only noise came from the passing cars and the droning of the Carcachita's motor. As we passed by Main Street School, I reached underneath the front seat and pulled out my penny collection, which I kept in a small white cardboard box. I then felt my shirt pocket for my blue notepad. I took it out, placed it in the box, and held them both tightly in my hands as I stared out the window, wondering what Orosi would be like. After we had been traveling for a few miles, I put my notepad back in my shirt pocket, took the top off my coin box, and started looking at my pennies. I divided them into two layers separated by cotton. On top were my favorites, a 1910 Lincoln head and an 1865 Indian head. The 1910 Lincoln head penny had belonged to Papa, but he gave it to me. We were living in Delano, and every day, after coming home from picking grapes, Papa took out his small metal box where he kept our savings and placed a day's earnings inside. One Sunday evening, when he emptied the box on the table to count the money, a penny rolled off and landed next to me. I picked it up and handed it to him. "Do you know how old this coin is?" he asked. "No," I said. "It was made in 1910, the year I was born," he said proudly. "It's a very old penny," Mama said, chuckling as she cooked supper on her kerosene stove. Papa glanced over at Mama, laughed, and replied, "It's only a couple years older than you, vieja." Holding it in his hand, Papa continued, "The revolution started that same year." "What revolution?" I asked. "The Mexican Revolution," he responded. "I don't know the whole story," he said apologetically. "I didn't go to school, but what I do know I learned from listening to corridos and to your abuelita, Estefania. She told me that during that time, many of the rich haciendados treated the campesinos like slaves." "Did Abuelito Hilario fight in the revolution?" I asked. "No, mijo. My father died 6 months after I was born. But your abuelita favored the revolution, just like all poor people did. I also heard that many hacendados buried their money and jewels in the ground to hide them from the revolutionaries. Many of those treasures have never been found, but they say that yellowish red flames shoot out from underneath the ground where the treasure is buried, that you can see the blazes from far away at night." Then, with a twinkle in his eyes, he added, "I don't know if that's true, but that's what they say." Papa reached out, took my right hand, and placed the penny in it, saying, "You can have it. This way you'll never forget the year I was born, and if you keep on saving pennies, someday you'll have your own treasure." I was so excited I almost forgot to thank Papa. I examined the penny closely. The year 1910 was worn. That is when I started collecting pennies. I liked the older ones best. As we made our way to San Luis Obispo grade, I placed the Lincoln Head penny back in the box and took out my 1865 Indian Head coin. Carl gave it to me when I was in 5th grade in Corcoran. He and I were good friends in school, and when we found out that we both collected coins, we became the best of friends. We made sure we got on each other's team when we played ball during recess, and we ate our lunch together every day. One Friday after school, Carl invited me to his home to see his coin collection. As soon as the last bell rang, we both ran to his house, which was only 3 blocks away. When I walked in, I was amazed. I had never been inside a house before. The rug underneath my feet felt like a sack full of cotton. The living room was warm and as big as the one-room cabin we lived in. The light was soft and soothing. Carl then showed me to his room. He had his own bed and his own desk, and from the closet, which was half full of clothes, he pulled out a cigar box and several dark blue folders. "These are my pennies," he said, opening one of the folders. His coins were all neatly organized by year. My eyes and fingers went straight to the oldest. "That's an 1860 Indian Head," he said. "I thought all pennies were Lincoln Heads," I said in surprise. "Oh, no," he exclaimed, opening the cigar box. "See, I have lots of them." "I'll give you one of my Lincoln pennies for one of your Indian Heads," I said. Carl thought about it for a while and then said, "You don't have to. I'll give you one. Pick the one you want." "Thanks," I said excitedly. I quickly went through the loose pennies in his box and picked one made in 1865. It was the oldest one I could find. On the way back to school to catch the bus, Carl said, "When can I come see your house and see your collection?" His question took me by surprise. I never thought he would want to visit me at our home, and after seeing his house, I was not sure I wanted him to see where I lived. "Well, when?" he asked again, looking a bit confused because I did not answer him. After thinking of possible excuses, I finally said, "I live too far. I'll bring my collection to school. It's not much, just a few Lincoln Head pennies." "That's okay. I'd like to see it anyway," he said. I never got the chance to show Carl my collection. That weekend, we moved to 5 Points, and I never saw my friend again. I placed the penny back in the box and closed it. I looked straight ahead through the windshield between Papa and Mama to see how far we had traveled and to look for road signs to Arosi. "What does Arosi mean?" I asked Papa. "I'm not sure, mijo," he responded, "but I have a feeling we're gonna like it there." I took out my notepad and wrote the word down, breaking it into 2 syllables. Oro, sí. Oro meant gold in Spanish, and sí meant yes, or if. Based on what Papa said, I figured it meant yes in this case. I took the notepad and held it in the palm of my hand. It was almost brand new when I found it in the city dump in Santa Maria. Now its blue, soft covers were beginning to fade, and its corners were frayed. As I smoothed them out with my fingers, I recalled when I first started to use it. I was in Miss Martin's 6th grade class in Santa Maria. At the end of January, we had just returned from Fresno, where I started the 6th grade in Mr. Lima's class in November. I was behind in English, Miss Martin's favorite subject. Every day she would write down a different English word on the blackboard and ask the class to look it up in our dictionaries as fast as we could. The student who found the word the quickest would get a point, and at the end of the week, the one with the most points would get a gold star. I never got a star or a point. It took me too long to find the words, and I did not know what many of them meant. So I got the idea of writing the words down in my notepad along with their definitions and memorizing them. I did this for the rest of the year, and after I left Miss Martin's class, I continued adding new words and their definitions to my notepad. I also wrote other things I needed to learn for school and things I wanted to know by heart, like spelling words and math and grammar rules. I carried the notepad in my shirt pocket, and while I worked in the fields, memorized the information I had written in it. I took my librito with me wherever I went. After traveling for about 5 hours, we arrived at our new home in Orosi. It was an old 2-story yellow wooden house. It was located about 15 miles outside the city limits. Mr. Petrini, the owner, told us that the house was 70 years old. We could not use the second level because the floors were unstable. The first floor had 2 rooms and a kitchen. Behind the house was a large barn and hundreds of vineyards. It did not take long to unload our carcuchita and settle in. Papa, Mama, and Rora took one room. Roberto, Trampita, Torito, Ruben, and I moved into the other one. I'm on page 104. After my brothers and I put away our few things, I sat on the floor and looked at my pennies. I wanted to make sure they were not rubbing against each other in the box before placing them underneath the mattress. When I looked up, Rora was standing next to me. "Can I have one?" "One what?" I asked. "A penny," she answered. "Not one of these," I said. "They are special." She made a face and walked away, stomping her tiny feet. That evening, before going to bed, I checked on my pennies again. I then took off my shirt and carefully hung it on the nail in the wall and made sure my notepad did not fall out of the pocket. After our prayers, we slipped into bed. I had trouble falling asleep. "I can't believe we are living in a house," I thought to myself. My little brothers and I must have been excited too, because they started whispering and giggling. Roberto tried to quiet them down, but they would not stop. "Listen," Roberto said in a loud whisper. "I hear La Llorona weeping upstairs." "I don't hear anything. You're just trying to scare us," Trampita answered. "No, I am not," Roberto responded. "Just be quiet, and you'll hear her." There was dead silence for the rest of the night.